My husband and I got married today, but my two childhood sweethearts, who once swore they'd put me on their family registry, had no idea. Instead, they were busy fussing over the girl who had supposedly saved my life. To cheer her up, they even bought her an adorable ragdoll cat as a thank you gift. They completely forgot that I was severely allergic to cat fur. So, the moment I stepped into my home after being discharged from the hospital, I went into allergic shock and had to be rushed back. And when I told them, between gasps for breath, that the girl had orchestrated the whole life-saving incident, they didn't believe me. The moment I regained consciousness in the emergency room, I called my uncle and told him to arrange my marriage. After all, since my parents passed away, my uncle had always looked out for me. He had already arranged a good match for me once, but back then I hesitated. The second I gave my consent this time, he sprang into action, determined to move things along quickly. "Before you get muddle-headed again and waste your time," he said, "I'm Mackenzie. Didn't I tell you before? Those two childhood sweethearts of yours, barely good enough to be your friends. As a man, I can tell you right now, neither of them has the quality to be a good husband. A man always knows another man's flaws better. I used to think my uncle, being a man, would never understand a woman's heart. After all, only the one wearing the shoes knows if they fit. But before I even had a chance to put them on, these shoes had already hurt me countless times. Uncle, send me his info. I'll schedule the registration now." Marriage was a decision between two people, and for once, I was going to take charge of something. As I was setting the appointment, Tom Weston and Jeff Lawrence barged into my hospital room. Both of them spoke at the same time. "What appointment? What are you registering for?" I saw no reason to hide it. "I'm getting married," I said. They exchanged glances. Then, realizing neither of them was my groom, they both let out a relieved laugh. "You're joking, right?" I ignored them and kept booking my appointment. Curious, they leaned in, as they always did, to sneak a look. But before they could see, Tom's phone rang, a ringtone mimicking a cat's meow, one he had set specifically for Elizabeth Collins. "Tom, I think there's someone in my house," Elizabeth said in a panic. Without a word, Tom jumped. "Up!" and he and Jeff rushed out together. While at it, Tom said, "Elizabeth, don't go inside. Wait for us at the usual spot." I listened to his panicked voice and the hurried footsteps as they faded down the hallway. They had not even known each other for a month, and they already had a usual spot just for the three of them. I smirked and confirmed the earliest possible date for the marriage registration. The day I was discharged from the hospital, Tom and Jeff finally showed their face again. The two of them were on the rush, constantly urged me to speed up my pace, so I kindly told them if they had something more urgent, they were welcome to leave first. Jeff grumbled at Tom with a gloomy face. "Didn't I tell you to split up? Now Elizabeth is waiting for us, and if anything happens to her, you'll regret it." Tom shot back at Jeff, his eyes full of anger. "Do you think I want to be here?" Back then, they would have fought over who got to pick me up from the hospital. No, I was nothing but a burden to them. I smiled and hailed a taxi from the street. Seeing this, they pulled me out of the taxi with annoyed faces. "Joy, what do you think you're doing, huh?" "Elizabeth had organized a surprise party for you to celebrate your discharge from the hospital," they said, without giving me a chance to refuse. They dragged me into their car. As soon as they closed the door, they immediately dialed Elizabeth's number and chatted animatedly with her the whole ride. I felt I had become invisible, so I closed my eyes to rest. Only when we reached the bar did I realize the so-called surprise for me was actually a birthday celebration for Elizabeth. With hands filled with beautiful wrapped gifts, Tom and Jeff hurried over toward her, though those were the same presents they had chosen for my birthday this year. Seeing that the gifts had a new owner, and I had no interest in playing a supporting role, I turned around to leave. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a cat lunged at me. Without a second thought, I kicked it away, sending it flying. With a yell, Elizabeth, who was still wearing a party hat, stormed up to me. Joy, if you have a problem with me, just come at me directly. Why did you have to take it out on poor Lily? Asked Elizabeth. Meanwhile, the cat that was cradled in Elizabeth's arms let out a pitiful whimper as if it had been terribly wronged. Without any pause, Tom and Jeff immediately scolded me. Joy, as he said, that Tom dumped an entire blister pack of allergy medicine into my hands. Maybe you should reflect on why you're the only one who is so sensitive to cats. I don't believe you'll still have an allergy if you take this whole pack. Did he actually expect me to swallow all those pills? I wondered. I quickly grabbed just one and forced it down. I told them one is enough. Hearing my words made Tom and Jeff became even more displeased. Elizabeth is right. How can you be severely allergic to cat fur? Looks like your whole hospital stay was just an act. His words made the bitterness of the dissolving medicine linger in my throat. There was a time when if a stray cat wandered within 5 meters of me, they would be on high alert and treat it like a dire threat. Yet now my allergy had become my original sin. First, they let that cat roam freely in my room, causing me to go into anaphylactic shock. Later, they accused me of faking my symptoms just to get hospitalized. Now, after the cat almost attacked me, I was the one being labeled as fragile by them. Elizabeth was crying her heart out beside us, looking at a loss. I don't know what I did wrong, but if I made you upset, it's my fault. I'm sorry. Will you please stay and celebrate my birthday with me? Please? She pleaded as she said that. Her tears were flowing non-stop with practiced precision. Tom was so heartbroken seeing her like this that he immediately went to wipe her tears, while Jeff couldn't help but drag me aside to reprimand me. You've taken allergy medicine, right? So, even if you kiss the cat, it won't kill you. With that, he rushed back to join Tom and comforted Elizabeth. Don't cry, Elizabeth. Let me apologize on Joy's behalf. She has been spoiled rotten since she was a child, so don't take her seriously. In their effort to appease Elizabeth, they eagerly listed every flaws that I had. Right on cue, Elizabeth's tears turned into a smile. When she glanced at me, her eyes were full of smugness and challenge. At that time, I realized how little I mattered to them. As the music started, the two of them rushed to ask Elizabeth's hand to dance. She chose Tom and left Jeff sulking there. Then Jeff turned toward me in frustration and extended his hand to me to ask me to dance. I rubbed the itchy rash that was spreading across my skin and shook my head. It seemed my refusal did not make Jeff upset. Instead, he sat beside me while downing drink after drink, as his eyes glued to the couple swaying together on the dance floor. Joy, do you think Elizabeth likes Tom? He asked. There was disappointment and jealousy that I could clearly hear in his tone. It was obvious to everyone that Elizabeth preferred Tom over him. My silence pushed Jeff to rise to his feet. As soon as the song ended, he stormed back onto the dance floor to pull Elizabeth away. I didn't feel like watching the drama of two men fighting over one woman, so I took my leave. Suddenly, amid the crowd's gasps, Elizabeth found me and forcibly dragged me back to the dance floor. Joy, please talk to Tom and Jeff. Although she pleaded me, it could not conceal the bragging in her voice. I refused her outright. If you can't stop them, why do you think I will be able to do it? However, the crowd gasped again. This time Tom had taken a punch, and blood was streaming from his nose. This finally snapped Elizabeth from her acting and made her panic. She yanked me with all her strength, nearly dragging me to the middle of their brawl. The reason for their fighting was that Elizabeth's neighborhood was not the safest, so they were arguing about whose house she should stay in. Jeff believed that since Tom had already gotten the first dance, it was his turn to have her stay over at his house. I had no desire to break up their fight, and it was a pathetic sight to watch. Yet, surprisingly, their heated argument turned toward me. With tears in her eyes, Elizabeth asked me, "Can I stay in your house? What I mean is, since you're allergic to cats, you probably haven't had time to tidy up anyway. Why don't you let me stay here?" Just then, Tom and Jeff, who were fighting harshly, stopped their fight and looked at me in unison. You know, Elizabeth has a point. Would you mind staying in a hotel? For a few days, Joy. We'll cover all the costs. I considered it for a moment before suggesting, "Why don't I just sell the house to Elizabeth instead?" It seemed Tom and Jeff thought I did not want to let Elizabeth stay. They were immediately gaslighting me by reminding me of how she had once saved my life. The onlookers, who didn't know the full story, joined in. They encouraged me to pay the favor. To pressure me into agreeing, both men handed me $300,000 in front of the crowd. "It's only for a few days. Consider this money a rental fee, okay?" At this point, it seemed inappropriate for me to refuse. "Fine." The three of them immediately cheered, high-fiving each other as if the previous arguments had never happened. No longer looking at the three, who continued to dance passionately, I went home to pack my bags. On my way back, Elizabeth sent me a message. "Joy, I think that amount of money should be enough to buy your house, right? Why don't you just sell me the house?" What she suggested was exactly what I wanted. I had no plans to return after getting married in Ansell City, so I needed to get rid of the house anyway. Elizabeth was delighted when I agreed, and pleaded with me not to tell Tom and Jeff just yet. Of course, I was more than happy to comply. Looking around the house, I realized that aside from my parents' belongings, there wasn't much I needed to take. The next day, when Tom and Jeff June brought Elizabeth back, the junk removal service I hired had already cleared out everything I did not want. They did not look too happy seeing the nearly empty house. "Joy, we only asked you to lend your home for a few days. Do you really have to make it look like you're guarding against a thief? You're overthinking it. It's cleared out the things I don't need." Making space for Elizabeth, I replied calmly. My explanation seemed to appease them at least a little. "Well, fine. We'll help you replace the furniture later." Elizabeth, who had been watching me nervously, finally relaxed when I agreed. Without saying more, I smiled and agreed with the two of them, then pushed my suitcase toward the door. They insisted on seeing me downstairs, and I couldn't refuse, so I let them. Just as I was about to step into the elevator, the fire alarm blared through the entire building. Next second, the power went out. Tom and Jeff immediately rushed to shield Lisbeth and guided her down the emergency stairs. Smelling smoke, I grabbed my suitcase and made my way to the emergency exit in a hurry. The bulky suitcase made it hard to navigate, and I almost lost my balance on the stairs when someone bumped into me. Thankfully, a hand caught me, and I fell into a warm embrace. "Watch your step. Are you okay?" The man's deep, magnetic voice brushed past my ear, making my face flush red. I tried to pull my hand away, but he held me securely, shielding me from the jostling crowd. We finally reached safety, and he released me. My face burned as I thanked him. He looked at me intently. "You don't have to be so formal toward me. After all, we're practically family." Startled, I looked up and found myself staring into his dark, obsidian-like eyes.